Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darylyn and today I am feeling really irritated. So I have been working on like a really exciting and special video for like a couple of weeks now, and it was one of those plant list videos that takes a lot of time. I just like show you tons of plants and talk about them, and those videos are super fun, but they're also a ton of work. And I was basically getting to the point where it was done, like it was edited and I was getting ready to put it out soon. And then I woke up this morning and freaking one of the plants that I talk about at length in the video, it just came out that the whole thing was a scam. And I know what you're thinking, like, why don't you just like edit that out of the video? Well, unfortunately I can't, because I did it as like a top 10 list, and so I just like would skip a number. It's just like a whole mess. So I'm just gonna have to like go back and like reshoot it, which is super annoying, and I'm all fired up about it. So I thought, in light of this scam that like screwed me on my video, this would be a good opportunity to talk about plant myths, scams, and conspiracies. Buckle up, because the tea is hot and I'm about to spill it. But before we get into it, I would just like to quickly note that this video is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not specifically calling out anyone in particular, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. With that out of the way, I hope you enjoy. All right, coming in at number 10, we have Botanical Garden Robberies. Now, this is honestly like kind of hard to believe that anyone would be such a dick as to go and burglarize a botanical garden, considering that they're supposed to be literally for everyone so that everyone can enjoy plants and learn about horticulture and whatnot. But this happened, and this isn't even like apparently or allegedly that this happened. Like, no, this like really did happen. And yeah, the reason we know is because a couple people got caught and they like had to apologize, and it was really embarrassing. And some of them even like became pariahs in the plant community, and like their businesses suffered, which like I know that sounds bad, and I promise I'm not like dying of schadenfreude, but like if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Unsurprisingly, the like top plants in question that were nicked from botanical gardens were Monstera obliqua Peru, back before it became a lot more widely available and they were still selling for thousands of dollars, and the Philodendron Spiritus Sancti, which is still extremely rare, and they do still sell for thousands of dollars. So I could see why people tried to steal them, but at the same time, that don't make it right. Coming in at number 9, we have fake hybrids. Now, many of you may be aware that the plant community does love its hybrids, and there are many of them floating around. Philodendron hybrids tend to be a bit more resilient and hardy than their pure parents, and the Anthurium community loves to have a grand old time hybridizing everything and anything that they can get their hands on. Now then, with all this planty hanky-panky going on, there are bound to be some mix-ups, and yes, sometimes plants are represented as hybrids when they're fake. The most notorious example of this happened last year in 2021 when someone who will not be named claimed to have hybridized the Philodendron Spiritus Sancti and the Philodendron Jose Buono. For anyone who's not familiar with the two of those plants, the Philodendron Spiritus Sancti is basically the holy grail of philodendron, you know, other than like super rare variegated ones. And the Jose Buono is a very beautiful plant with stable variegation, gorgeous stable variegation. The hope was, of course, that a hybrid of the two plants would produce a Spiritus Sancti looking thing that had beautiful stable Jose Buono variegation, and people went absolutely wild for this. This was one of those situations where it was actually probably good to not have like money lying around to burn, because a lot of people dropped thousands of dollars to get their hands on these seedlings when none of them had actually ever been grown out and proven. Unfortunately, it turns out that people started to chatter about whether or not the plants really did have any Spiritus Sancti in them, and after they were tested, it was proven that the plant was 100% Jose Buono and had no Spiritus Sancti in it. People were rightly like pretty mad about this, and you know, the individual in question claimed that he genuinely thought that the hybrid had worked, but in the end, fake hybrids do happen, and it's something that you have to keep an eye out for because it is an easy scam to pull. Coming in at number 8, we have incorrect identifications. Now, I'm not talking about people arguing online in Facebook groups over whether this plant is that or that plant is this and quibbling over semantics of scientific names. I'm talking about people deliberately peddling plants masquerading as something that they are clearly not. Prime example of this that I've been seeing in recent weeks is people trying to pass off Philodendron Paraiso Verde as Philodendron Ilsemanii. The Ilsemanii seems to be a rather popular one for people to try and sneak a dupe in place of the real thing, as there is a plant circulating in Southeast Asia right now being called Ilsemanii and marketed as such. That is not actually the same thing as the true Philodendron Ilsemanii, that it is its own species. People are defending this practice by saying that's what the plant is referred to in the trade down there, but that doesn't make it the correct ID, and it doesn't make it not misleading. Another notorious example of this is the Philodendron Whipple Way. There are a number of incorrect IDs floating around trying to pass themselves off as Philodendron Whipple Way. Variegated Philodendron domesticum is a common one since they look very similar when they're juvenile and have a similar variegation pattern with Polaroid variegation. I've also seen a plant labeled as Philodendron Whipple Way mottled floating around that doesn't quite look right and apparently is not a genuine Philodendron Whipple Way. So if you're looking for something like that, make sure you're really careful about getting the plant correctly ID'd and actually ending up with what you're paying for. Coming in at number 7, we have price fixing. Now, I think a lot of us have heard kind of the rumor or the myth of the warehouses full of perfect Monstera albo just sitting in secret locations across Southeast Asia, not being sold on the market in order to keep the prices up. However, there was a much more deliberate attempt at price fixing in the plant community last year when certain Facebook groups banned the sale of Monstera obliqua when the price started to fall in order to preserve the intrinsic value of the plant. Yeah, really all that they succeeded in doing was making themselves look really stupid, because the uproar about unfair selling practices and price fixing was swift. It did nothing to actually keep the price of the plant up, because of course these are not the only places that people could purchase it. Very silly, very shady, very sus, very scammy, but ultimately ineffectual. Coming in at number 6, we have fake auction bids. Now, we've all been privy to the conversations online and maybe even among our personal plant friends about people bemoaning how out of control the prices on certain plants have gotten. And this is true. Plants are expensive sometimes. However, there have been instances of people colluding to place fake bids in auctions to drive the price of the plant up so much that the auction ends up not being able to go through. The most famous example of this happened last year with the notorious NSE Tropicals Variegated Gloriosum auction. These plants do go for quite a lot of money, and $50,000 at the time for Variegated Gloriosum was not unheard of. However, multiple trolls started putting in fake bids so quickly that the auction had gone up over a couple $100,000 for this plant before NSE pulled the plug. No one's really sure why people feel motivated to do this. There's some speculation that it might be other plant sellers. They're trying to make things difficult for their competitors. Regardless, it's sus, and that's why it's made this list. Coming in at number 5, we have tissue culture quality control. Now, I think that this probably qualifies as the first myth on this list, and that is the belief or rumor going around that sometimes tissue culture plants are inferior to plants that are grown from seed or propagated from cuttings or other methods. Cooler heads in the community have emphasized over and over again that tissue culture plants are clones, and that means that they are identical copies of whatever mother plant stock the cells were pulled from. Now, I guess I'm going to chime in here a little bit with my own kind of like pseudo conspiracy theory, because while it is true that tissue culture plants are clones of the mother stock, that doesn't mean that mutations can't still happen during the cloning process. What I think probably happened here in the cases where people are getting tissue culture plants and they're not seemingly like as robust or quite as identical to the same plant that was produced by other means, what I wouldn't be surprised happened is that there was some kind of mutation during the tissue culture process. And then it wasn't catastrophic enough to justify tossing the batch. The example that comes to mind is the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. These have been talked about for years as the tissue culture Rhaphidophora tetrasperma are not as robust as the traditionally grown version. And so what I think may have happened is there may have just been a small mutation during the batch and the plants still grew and they were still alive and they weren't messed up enough to justify throwing them out. And, you know, while it has been brought up that people who are doing tissue culture are not going to choose weak plants on purpose, that's, I'm sure, true, but they also can't control if there are mutations occurring. And why would you throw out a batch of plants that are like good enough when you could sell them and make money? So that's just my opinion. That's probably like legitimately a conspiracy theory, my own original conspiracy theory. But yeah, people talk about tissue culture all the time, and I'm sure that there's a number of folks out there who are just trashing it to try and encourage people to buy plants from them rather than big box stores, which, like, I don't know, like, is it really such a bad thing to like support small businesses and buy plants from like small growers rather than giant big box conglomerates? Anyway, I digress. There's definitely conspiratorial thinking around tissue culture, and that is why it's made this list. Coming in at number 4, we have fake variegation. Now, this refers to plant growers using chemicals or other artificial means to change the color of leaves on plants that would otherwise just be green. These are then sold as a fancy variegated plant, and it turns out it's a scam. The most notorious instance of this kind of peaked a couple of years ago with the philodendron pink Congo. That plant caused a big uproar in the community when it was exposed as a scam, because that plant really had its heyday around the same time that the pink princess was at the highest it had ever been price-wise. And a lot of people thought that the pink Congo was going to be the next big thing. The pink Congo was just a philodendron red Congo, which are very common plants and really not worth anything, that was purported to have new leaves coming out pink. They would then fade down to green, similar to how a Florida ghost puts out a white leaf that then fades down to green. It was discovered that this was just a scam, and the pink coloration was artificially induced in the plant using chemicals. Once the plant left the grower and was in the home of the buyer, there was no way to ever produce more pink leaves, and all these plants reverted, and the scam was exposed, and most people are aware of it now and don't buy the plant anymore. However, it seems like they didn't learn their lesson the first time, and someone at least is still trying to get away with doing this. The new plant that's popped up on people's radar as having potentially artificially induced pink variegation and new leaves is the philodendron dark lord. It's very possible that these philodendron dark lord that have pink emergent leaves are being chemically treated, and they're not going to continue to do that as they produce more. So if you are in the market for something of that sort, be very, very careful and really do your research, poke holes in the sales pitch of the seller. And if it was me personally, I would not touch that plant with a 10-foot pole. Coming in at number 3, are the Costa Farms Thai Constellations ever coming? Now, most of you probably know what I'm talking about. There has been chatter for years about Costa Farms tissue culturing Thai Constellation Monstera and putting them out in big box stores for insanely low prices compared to what they are selling for from a conventional plant shop. Thai Constellation are a type of large form Monstera deliciosa, and they have beautiful stable variegation. And so the thought was that they would be able to be created from tissue culture in a massive scale. Costa Farms is a very large plant grower in the United States, and they have purportedly been working on mass producing Thai constellation for years now, and nobody really knows what's going on. Every single year we hear the same thing. The Thai constellations are coming the next year. The Thai constellations are coming the next year. Don't buy a Thai constellation. That's overpriced. You'll be able to get one from Costa Farms next year for pennies on the dollar. And at this point, man, I think I've been hearing about the Thai constellations from Costa Farms for at least 3 years. And yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if they're ever actually coming. Apparently they did do a test run and they did sell like a limited number of them to the public for $99 last year. But at this point, like, are they ever coming? I almost feel like the Thai constellation from Costa Farms is a myth, like a plant community myth. Like, is this ever coming? Like, I honestly don't think it is. And it makes sense that like something probably has gone like horribly wrong with their calculations, because Thai constellations are notorious for rotting and they're really hard to propagate because the nodes are so close together. Like, it would not surprise me if the tissue culture yield to like starts ratio is like terrible and like they're losing like the vast majority of their tissue culture starts to rot or something, and it's just not going as well as they had hoped. But I think that that is honestly at this point like a myth. So I don't know, maybe someday we will have the fabled cheap Thai constellation from Costa Farms, but at this point, like, I don't know, I wouldn't hold your breath. Like, if you want a Thai constellation, I would just go for it, honestly. All right, coming in at number 2, we have fake cultivars. Now, this is specifically what has me all riled up today, and that is because one of the plants that I put in my Monstera video, it turns out it was a fake cultivar. What do I mean by this? So there's been a practice like for a while, and people know about it and people talk about it, of people taking a name that sounds snazzy and applying it to a plant that's just not a different, unique thing in order to market it and to make money. A recent example off the top of my head is people have kind of started calling like reverted pink princesses Philodendron Merlot, which is like funny to me because reverted pink princesses aren't worth anything. But anyway, I digress. The plant in question that screwed me over, and now I have to scrap my whole video, was a form of variegated Monstera that, like, oh my god, this whole situation is so wild, and I'm really surprised it took people this long to like figure it out if this is indeed what happened. But apparently this person had this Monstera sport that they named after themselves, which like 10 out of 10, like hubris level, like respect on that one. And they were like marketing it as this super, super rare, prestigious plant. And I think I don't remember if I got an invitation or if I joined of my own volition, but I remember like last year, some Facebook group that was like super exclusive, elite, like top of the line collector plant focus group. And this plant was listed as an example of a super duper rare plant that you would find in this group. I kind of like, I want to say that like maybe this person created this Facebook group. That's a conspiracy theory. That's conjecture on my part. Like, I have no evidence that that's what happened, but if it is what happened, that's like sus. Anyway, so this person has this plant that they've named after themselves that they're marketing as a super rare, like super high-end Monstera sport, and they're charging an arm and a leg for it. And then so it actually doesn't really surprise me that this happened, weirdly enough, because as I was researching my Monstera video, I was having a really hard time like figuring out like what made this plant different from a whole bunch of other ones that I was looking at. Like, I struggled with that part of the video. And then when I woke up this morning and saw that, oh, actually like it's a scam, this person was getting these plants from overseas from like someone who's known to have something that looks identical, and that supplier like stopped selling them plants, and so they don't have any more of these plants that they're saying like was their plant. So they basically just like took someone else's intellectual property and like put their own name on it and then jacked up the price. Like, allegedly, if this is like actually what happened, like that's wild. That's wild. This is hearsay essentially, but like if that's what happened, and I'm not like naming the person or the name of the plant, but like that's wild. You have to have balls the size of like I don't know, something really big, to do that and think that you're gonna get away with it, that's so crazy. I mean, like, clearly they didn't get away with it. Just like, you know, I'll just take something that's not mine and put my name on it and like sell it for more money. That's nuts. So it turns out that, yeah, the plant, it's not a real thing, and it is rare, you know, what it is rare, but like it's not anywhere near as rare as this person was trying to pass it off for, and they're not worth the amount of money that this person was trying to convince people that they were worth. So yeah, the situation's like really messy, and I don't understand how this keeps happening. Like, there are so many people trying to pull scams in the plant community. Like, stop. Like, most of us are just here to have fun. So yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, but at the same time, like, this has happened before. It's probably gonna happen again. I guess the thing to learn here is that if you are like really looking for a unicorn and like you were trying to cheat yourself and like drop some like crazy money on a plant, like make sure you do your research, make sure it's like a real thing. You can check on the International Aroid Society and verify if it's a real cultivar or not. Some things that are, you know, like real things are not their own cultivar, but like that's one place to start. And then you can also like ask around, like ask people that are really experienced collectors in kind of the, you know, niche that you're looking in. And then if it's really like that much money, like you should absolutely have someone verify that it's genuine. And just keep in mind at the end of the day, and like this is like applies to plants, but just in life in general, if something sounds too good to be true, like it probably is. And it's just better to walk away than to believe what you want to believe. And you know, these sellers know how to tell people what they want to hear. So just like be careful and don't drop crazy money on something unless you're 100% sure that you're getting what you think you're paying for. All right, so now that's like depressing and annoying. So I wanted to end on a little bit of like a high note with something fun. And that is why coming in at number 1, we have the kind of like funny tongue-in-cheek plant community myth of the old collector who has been keeping plants for many, many years, and they're not plugged into social media and they have no idea what they have, and they're willing to sell you extremely rare unicorn plants for basically impossibly cheap prices. Now, this is like, I love that people like hold out hope for something like this happening for them. I mean, like maybe this has happened and like this exists, and like some, you know, like sweet old lady sold you an Ilsemanii for like $15 or something. But by and large, I don't think that these really exist. Like just because somebody's not plugged into social media doesn't mean that they can't get the information from other places, you know? Like people who've been collecting for a really long time, like back before the plant boom, I mean, they don't do it in a vacuum. Like they go to plant shows, they're members of their local like Aroid Society, they get like plant magazines and journals sent to them, they have plant friends, they talk about these things, you know, like really, really dialed in collectors. They probably know how rare things are and like what they're worth more so than Facebook and YouTube plant collectors. So I do think that this is a myth, like, you know, something to fantasize about. It's kind of fun of like, oh, like I wish I could meet like a nice old plant collector that doesn't care about the money, who'll give me, you know, like all my wish list plants for basically nothing. Yeah, I mean, like I wish that too, but I think that's a myth. But it's funny like how often this comes up. Like you hear people like kind of bring this up online. Like I've seen it brought up like more than once for sure, of people being like, oh, well, these prices are ridiculous. Like my cousin's roommate's brother's acquaintance got X plant for, you know, like $15 from someone. This is overpriced. It's like, yeah, okay, like I don't believe that for a second. Or people will be like bemoaning like how expensive things are, and they're like, oh, we just need to find a little old lady with like a giant albo that doesn't, you know what it's worth. So anyway, I digress. I think that that's actually like a really cute one. Like the rest of the stuff on this list is like sus, but like the idea that there's like sweet old plant collectors out there that just want to like give the kids plants is like sweet and cute, and I wish it was a real thing. All right, well, thanks for chilling with me. This was kind of fun. I feel much better now after complaining about my misfortunes of having to redo my video. Make sure that you comment your thoughts on all of this tea down below in the comments, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!